Hi, my name is Kaylee Shaw, and this is Memento Mori, an original idea for a probably mostly game world I had about 3 months ago now, and have been developing since. The logline for Memento Mori is explore the afterlife as a pair of death-defying friends on their way to meet death herself. Ascend through the crumbling house of death, a sprawling and spectral Victorian mansion, the form of which is controlled by death with the use of the important memories of those inside of it. Memento Mori is a tale that challenges pervasive concepts of death and the afterlife. Synopsis, based on that logline, is the world of Memento Mori is not the world humanity expects to arrive in after they have died. Instead of being presented with a branching path to heaven and hell, or just pure never-ending blackness, they find themselves in a massive mansion inhabited by the ghosts and skeletons of the long dead and lost. Also living in the house is the embodiment of death, an ancient and exhausted being who controls the interior of the house as well as who finds their way to it. She uses the important memories of the dead to give the house form and meaning, and to make herself feel less lonely. However, the dead often become trapped by their memories in its rooms and are never able to move on. Even death eventually withers away, and as such her house has begun to crumble. She needs to pass on her abilities to someone new, but only someone who is worthy of it. The tone of Memento Mori is a pragmatically morbid look at death and the afterlife. However, it would mostly be seen through the perspective of two best friends who are very comfortable with one another and also very comfortable with death as a concept. And so there will probably be a bit of joviality in with the pragmatism. Its visual style will be inspired by Little Nightmares and Don't Starve, which are both video games, and Unis Honest, which is a YouTube series. Um, the locations in Memento Mori consist of about 6 different areas, or exactly 6 different areas, each sequentially higher in the house. It goes from the entranceway down to the basement, and then first, second, third floor, and then the attic. Each of these areas also attaches itself to a phase in the protagonist's life as they move through it, drawing on their memories to kind of reference their past. The exception to that rule is the attic, which does not use any of the protagonist's memories to present itself, as it's entirely controlled by death, who lives there. All of the costumes and props in Memento Mori will be either black, white, or a middle shade of gray between black and white. This goes for the main characters when they're in this world. Kieran is entirely black, including his clothing, with the exception of his tie, and Gale is entirely white, with the exception of his black tie. Some inspirations for the world: vaguely Victorian, mostly black and white, very dramatic. Some character concepts I made for Gale and Kieran over winter break. Uh, when they're in this world, they would most likely only ever be seen as the third versions of them from the either direction, actually. The middle version. Completely black or completely white. Gale is the main character, protagonist. He grew up in a wealthy and likewise stiflingly proper family. They disliked how morbid and pragmatic he often was as a child and hoped that he would make friends with some of the other more normal children. He didn't conform to their wishes, however, instead choosing the scrappy and equally odd Kieran as his friend. Gale was a reclusive teenager, preferring to spend his time studying math and science over most any other occupation, the exception to this rule being the time he spent playing chess with Kieran. Later, he put his skills in science to use by becoming a mortician, and though his family still had a distaste for Kieran, Gale would do anything for him. Here's Kieran. He comes from a poor family and was raised to be streetwise and charismatic, as was his family's way of trying to secure him a future. As such, he is generally resentful of the exorbitantly wealthy, with the sole exception of Gale. He loves and trusts Gale like a brother and delights in teasing him. In their childhood, Kieran was a wild child with interests in the macabre, and which his family encouraged. In his teens, he had learned to carry himself with the poise of someone from nobler origins than those from which he had actually come, and in his adulthood he runs the customer service and coffin construction aspects of his and Gale's shared funeral home business. Death is probably the closest thing to an antagonist the story that takes place in Memento Mori has. She is an enigmatic being who communicates with Kieran and Gale through notes hidden throughout her house. She is testing them to see if they can work together well enough to take over from her as the Masters of Death and the Afterlife, a job which she has been doing alone for centuries. She would prefer to make them both the kings of her realm, so they might avoid the loneliness she has experienced. Some basic concepts about the story. The genre would be fantasy with the pathway of buddy movie, as Gale and Kieran would be working together to make their way through the house. The size of it is very small, as it all takes place within that one house, but it's a very big house. The time it would take to get from the bottom of the house to the top, up all the way up to the attic, is about a day, and the media used to tell the story would be a puzzle game and a character diary research notebook from the perspective of both Kieran and Gale. The themes are going through grief with another person, the duality of death, friendship, and challenging the rules, even those of reality itself. Thank you. That's all.